So this is Saturday morning, 9 a.m. in Thailand, and it's Friday evening in the U.S. And today we'll be talking about a couple of things. One would be to cover again the issue of what is self and what is not self according to the teachings of the Buddha. That in fact, it's good to start at a foundation by understanding the Pali word for anatta, because it's relevant to understand that when it's translated into no self, that's a mistranslation. That if we understand the word atta, which is also used in the word atman or atmos, this is a word that is used that is basically closer to a soul than a self. That a soul is something that was known in the time of the Buddha, as well as in modern religions, as something that's strong and survivable, even survives death. And yet it is subject to influence. But the most important quality of a soul is that it accumulates junk over time. It becomes crusty with belongings, and that as it becomes crusty with belongings, it's completely identified with all of the crusty things that are around it. Hence, we have the idea of karma. You do good things, you get good results, and you do bad things, and you get bad results. This is built right into modern day into Christianity, and also came from the ancient Brahmanism that survived into modern day Hinduism, and that doing good actions and getting good results then, or doing bad actions and getting bad results, has a whole lot to do with some sort of third party that's making that determination about that action being good or bad. And not only that, but it has the quality of a store and forward mechanism, something like that you find in modern electronics, of a switch that stores and forwards information for a later time. And this requires then that switch, or that as a full-blown global switch. I generally call it the karma machine, and that others will call it, oh no, that's God. And I'm not sure what the Hindus attribute the ability to store and forward information that way. But when one of the qualities that the Buddha talked about is that there is no such mechanism that has that quality of store and forward. That he talked about it in the sense of cause and effect, that things cause and effect and cause and effect and cause and effect, and that there is no hard linkage there, because there's some effects have multiple causes, and so there's no way that you can guarantee that in fact one of the four imponderables that the Buddha talks about, things that cannot be pondered, cannot be figured out, things that are to be set aside. Now, one of them is the origins. Where did things get started? Where did things come from? And the answer to that is we weren't there. Well, let me ask, maybe some of us are old enough. Was anybody there at the Big Bang? Nobody there at the Big Bang, huh? Well, how does anybody know what happened at the Big Bang? The astronomers are trying to say, well, we've got a whole big trail of cause and effect that they can see that because the universe looks like it's expanding now, we can trace that expansion backwards into time. But now with much more modern telescopes like the James Webb, they put that into question. They're not really sure if there was a Big Bang. They're not really sure if there was an actual beginning. And why is that? Because they've got new causal evidence that they didn't have before. All right. So if we look at it from that perspective, we look at this issue of cause and effect, knowing that some of the input is incomplete, therefore the outcome is often indeterminable. And so that leads into the other one that which I was starting to talk about, and that is the karma. The Buddha says that no one knows for sure the results of good and bad action. That in fact, the only real thing that you can see is the immediate action of good results and the immediate action of a bad action giving bad results. But then he brought on a concept that even messes with that by talking about that much of the action is mixed. It's is mixed motivation. And not only is the motivation mixed, but that many of the inputs to the motivation and to the results of that action is uncontrollable because of the situation. Therefore, the whole story of good action gives good results and good action gives bad results is only partially true, and that most of the time action has mixed results. Now, the Buddha also had a fourth kind of karma, which is the karma that we're looking for, and that is the kind of karma that has neither good nor bad actions, just actions, with ordinary, or let us say, neither good nor bad results. Now, this in between, or in fact, in the suttas, the definitions are, the translations are dark and bright. If your actions are not intentionally bright and they're not intentionally dark, well, what does that mean? Well, dark actions means that you're causing other people or yourself harm. We can see that that indicates some sort of dukkha, or if we want to get magical about it, we can call it evil. Or we can call it not bright, as opposed to we're not looking for some long-term results. That what is happening right now is all that there is happening. And what the Buddha indicates about this fourth kind of karma, that is neither bright nor dark, actually brings around the end of action. Now, what that means is that as you begin to recognize that most of your bright karma, your bright action, doesn't give the bright results that you thought you were going to get, nor do you engage in any dark actions anymore, that all of your actions are right here, right now, with all the results right here, right now. And that brings about the end of this long-term karma idea that the Buddha was really big on, right here, right now. Now, the reason that I'm picking on karma so early is because the question is not only what is the store and forward mechanism, but who is it that experiences the result of bright and dark and mixed and neither who is it that experiences those results? The answer would be me, I. So this is where the me's and the I's come in, that though the Buddha taught anatta was no permanent self, there is still what we consider an impermanent self, something that arises just long enough to catch the results of some prior action and then may go away. This is what we would look at when we talk about personality view. The right personality view is not that there is a self that is there, that is permanent, that it exists, that it has components to it, and that it is subject to a God, so that after you die, that football kind of soul can either be kicked into heaven or kicked into hell, depending upon the whims of some large external force. So that's one end of it. The other one, which by the way would be called eternalism. The other end of it, which is quite often within Buddhism, is that there is no self, doesn't exist. And that would be considered nihilism. To say that, oh, there is no soul, which means that there are no consequences, which means that everything is meaningless. And so this would be a kind of anti-materialism spirituality, that nothing ever matters or anything is all gone away. But that's not the teaching of the Buddha. That in fact, you can see that these two extremes of nihilism and eternalism are both not only the extremes, but they're extremely not possible. Both of them are magical thinking. That the middle path is to look and to see what's happening right here, right now. And that looking and seeing what's right here, right now, we could call discernment. Now, the word discernment actually is a separate word that has different connotations from the word wisdom, but both of the words wisdom and discernment go back to the same Pali word of panya. And so you could say then that the distinction between wisdom and discernment would be that discernment can see exactly the cause and effect that's happening right now, and that wisdom is a little bit better than that, because wisdom can see actually how things are headed, how things are going, what might happen a tenth of a second from now, or maybe out into the future, the directions that things are going versus the impact. And so I have an old story from my past that I can tell you that might help you with that. And that is that we lived in a town of Abbeville, South Carolina, and my dad was making some friends who went hunting. And so he took me hunting with these hunter friends, and I learned a lot. It was only one weekend in my life, and yet it was possibly one of the most eventful weekends in my life, because I learned about dogs and I learned about guns. Now, in this particular part of the story, one of the old hunters there was carrying a double-barrel 12-gauge shotgun, very common weapon to carry, and he was carrying it under his shoulder, draped across his left arm. It wasn't open, it was locked and loaded. And he was talking and walking around with his gun, carrying it nonchalantly. And people became, let us say, leery, because from time to time, the barrel of that gun was pointed at this guy's kneecap or that guy's kneecap. And so they wanted to stay away from him because of the way that he was not watching the barrel of that gun. I think that this is become a standard operating procedure in modern day rifle ranges and whatnot, that you have to make sure that you know which direction the barrel is pointed, because you can look at the barrel and say, okay, if that gun goes off, we know in what direction that bullet's going to go in, or those BBs out of the shotgun. We're going to know which direction they're going. This is a good working definition of wisdom, is look at which direction the weapons of the mind are pointing, because if your mind goes off, that's the direction of the damage that's going to happen. Okay, so this is a good understanding of wisdom, to where discernment is to be able to see what actually got shot and what didn't when the gun does go off. So this is what we then mean by that, is discernment has to do with seeing the cause and effect situation right here, right now. See what the mind is doing that leads us into dukkha. And that we already have a very clear map that's set up by the Buddha in the Four Noble Truths, where it's saying that the dukkha is not permanent. The eternalist will say, yeah, the results of your actions will carry off and into the future or whatnot like that. And that the results of the actions are almost always immediate. They happen right here, right now, or let us say at the speed of the bullets. And that wisdom then would point to how things are headed, what directions are they going in. For instance, when you're listening to someone talk, you can sometimes hear fear and trepidation in their voice itself, which indicates that you know what they're about to say, because you can hear it in the tone of the voice even before they get started talking. And so then you're verified that, yeah, I knew that was coming. This would be called wisdom, then, of seeing what people are going to say based upon the tone of voice that they have. And the important point would be, in that regard, the person who is speaking with trepidation, with fear, with anxiety, etc., is not aware. He is not wise to the fact that he is giving away his mind's position just by the style of language that he's using. So, if we understand then that what is then the self? If the self is neither permanent nor completely non-existent, then what is it that is coming up? And the easy answer for that would be that the self is that which is there, comes up to experience the result of clinging, or upadana, and that it comes up at the time of upadana. Even though the description of paticca samuppada has it later, that doesn't mean that it's later chronologically, that it comes up with it. That in fact, you can say that from the feeling or Vedana comes then tanha, which is the grasping and clinging. And the grasping is the part that is the beginning of the self. When we want something, there's a we in there that wants. And when we gotta have it, when we're clinging, the self then is that which does the clinging. There's a clinger there. And when there is no clinging, there is no clinger. And so we can, Gigi, you have something to say about that? No, okay. So
I could pipe in just for a second to add some color. Where when you're talking about psychology, and you're usually referencing people like Eric or some other older psychologists, but I just wanted to share with you very quickly. There's a new method that has come out a few years ago called internal family systems. And what internal family systems helps people do is mindfully break apart these voices into what they call parts. And there's they call it the self, and it's really the higher self. And the self, or this space of silence and wisdom, is able to listen to these separate parts talking. And they could be parts that are in dukkha. Usually they are in dukkha, and they talk to that dissatisfaction, that disappointment, that suffering, until that suffering is able to integrate back into wholesomeness. And so I
Okay.
just wanted to share that with you, that these methods are coming out and they're helping people a lot. This one is called IFS.
All right. Well, I'm not familiar with the new stuff that's coming,
Nope.
but that does fit in fairly well with Eric Berne and going all the way back to Freud. Freud used terms that were very difficult to understand: ego, superego, and id, but Berne made them much more flexible by using the word parent, adult, and child. And what you're calling here the self is what Eric Berne would refer to as the adult. In the world of politics, it's the question of, well, who's the adult in the room? Who's the one that's actually observing, who's looking, who's seeing what's going on, to where the parent and the child are kind of stuck in positions. The parent is stuck into how it should be, the rules, the structures, the way that things should head, the oughts, the woulds, the shoulds. And Buddha called this the Sila Bhatta Paramasa, not Sila itself, but our own version that we attach to, the attachment of rights, rules, rituals, shoulds, woulds, coulds, oughtas, and all of that kind of stuff. And then the child is left to either accept or rebel against the parent. And it depends upon various circumstances, including how the child has grown into habit. But often the child will rebel against what the parent says. And in that case, we can say then that what is personality is the combination of whatever the parent ego state says, plus whatever the child's reaction is to that, so that we either go along with it. And when we go along, that often has to do with feelings of guilt, remorse, regret, etc., like that, because we've been called out. Or the other side of it would be rebellion, that we want to fix mommy because mommy is wrong. And that the adult in the room then is often not part of that dialogue. And so when we talk about the word samadhi in Buddhism, what we're talking about is a reintegration of these three ego states. Because in much of reality, when people think of personality, they're talking about the child ego state, the child's reactions to the world. And that if that's the case, then that child is not fixed. That child ego state is, in fact, not fixed. That's what makes it not a soul, and that it also isn't always there. That sometimes it's there and sometimes it's not. I often use the phrase, sometimes you feel like a nut and sometimes you don't. And that feeling like a nut is conditional. This is what we mean then by the cause and effect, and that we can begin to change our own conditioning. And that That change, by the way, often needs retraining. That we get it wrong and get it wrong and get it wrong over and over again. And what, in order to change that, we have a training to get out of it. This is why the Buddha talks about the Eightfold Noble Path, that is a training. And Anapanasati is a training because those three general states of remorse, regret, and revenge are three states that we don't have to ever go into. And yet we often do, because that's our habit pattern. Now, one of the qualities of those three states, remorse, regret, and revenge or rebellion, have to do with that they're not fun states. They're not happy states. They are, in fact, three different ways of experiencing dissatisfaction. And so we can actually begin to train out of those states into the reality of the situation by bringing the adult in and having the adult in our mind start to monitor. That's the discernment, to start looking at what's going on step by step, and then by making some changes. One of the changes that Byrne talked about, which I found quite remarkable, is to change that parent ego state out of being critical with all of her rules, rituals, rites, and all of that, into a nurturing state. So that mommy's job in the original times when the child was very young, mommy was a caretaker, which meant that she cared for the child. But as time goes on and the child begins to grow, she stops caring for the child in a nurturing way and starts caring about the child in the sense of rules and way things are supposed to be. And so if we can change the mommy's position out of the critical parent back into the nurturing parent, then the child is going to be a whole lot less fearful, because he's getting nourished, he's getting value, he's getting benefit, as opposed to being in that state of feeling like you've done something wrong and that you've got remorse, you've got regret, or that you're saying, no, I didn't do anything wrong. And that is where we come into the revenge and the rebellion. So if we can start, first off, to start to nurture the child, that's going to give us great benefit. And the example of that is that when someone starts to practice anapanasati correctly, they'll start to have wholesome thoughts. And then with discernment, they see an unwholesome thought come up. And that's when the critical parent comes out. Oh, no, you're not supposed to have unwholesome thoughts. Well, guess what? That is yet another unwholesome thought. But if you can say, that's all right, darling, never mind, start again, then that would be the wholesome way to do it. And so the child then is left with, let us say, guidance, as opposed to punishment and criticism. So if we understand that who is then this parent, this adult, and the child, the answer to that would be me. And so let me give you this example. Have you ever heard about the old way of doing things? Especially this happened with the Titanic and with big vessels at war and other things like that, that the captain goes down with the ship. You've heard that? The captain goes down with the ship. Why is that? Is because the captain identifies with the ship. the first mate, that's not his ship. He can get off of it when the ship goes down. But the captain has got to stay on board. Why? Because he is the ship. That's the identification. So when we attach to something that's going down, if we attach to it, that's the clinging, which means then that when the ship goes down, the clinger who is clinging to that ship is going to go down too. So, in other words, what we need to learn to do is to start being rats on our own ship, so that when the ship goes down, it's not our ship anymore. Let's find a way out of this thing. This then would be the identification of who is the self. The self is the one who owns, the owner. And that if we don't own anything, it's not me, it's not mine, then there is less likelihood of being any dissatisfaction. The Bhikkhu Buddhadasa talks about it in the sense of uh, nothing is worth clinging to as I, me, or mine. If we cling to something, it's going to probably go south. I mean, just cause and effect will prove that things are going to not. There has been, they've dug up ships from the Viking days. They've dug up ships from 2,000 years ago. Now, one of the qualities about a ship is it doesn't matter how much armor or how well made it is, it's still temporary. They all go down. Well, if a ship can go down, what about attitudes? How about cell phones, laptops? Everything goes down. Everything breaks. This is the quality that the Buddha talked about, is a nature. And the self will always come in as being in opposition to that anicca. Let's not let that thing go down. Now, if we care about it, that means then that when the ship goes down, when the laptop goes down, I go down too. It's my ship, it's my laptop, it's my plan that hit the dust. And so if we can separate from that, to let events be the way that they are, then I'm going to introduce a new concept. In fact, there's 3 words: owner, controller, and agent. That if we own something, then we try to control it. And that it is better for us to become agents of our life rather than the owner or controller of our life. But what is an agent? An agent is a third party who is, let us say, in his own world of agency, is bound to do the right thing for the client. And so the client then can trust that the agent is going to do the right thing. Now, I'll give you the example of someone doing their own income tax returns from the United States, but they make it really overly complicated with lots and lots of loopholes, which means then that everyone has an opportunity to fudge, to cheat, to lower their taxes. To where if you give your taxes to an agent, the agent is going to do it correctly based upon the law. So people who do their own income taxes almost always feel fear and guilt because they've cut corners or not sure that they've done it right. But if you give your income taxes over to an agent, you can let him take care of things. So what I'm talking about here is that we stop being the one who is, let us say, filling out our own tax returns and give it over to an agent within us who actually, in this case, is now going to be the adult, the one who is going to do it correctly, as opposed to doing it the way that we want it done. So I'll use this next analogy is a veterinarian, someone who takes care of animals. and the man or the woman brings their dog in, and the veterinarian looks at the dog and takes care of the dog. In other words, he's the agent, and his job is to do what's medically necessary for the animal, while the owner of the dog doesn't care for the dog. She brought it to the vet to do that. She cares about the dog, which means that every whimper the dog makes, she's going to whimper too. She really cares about the dog, which means that she's future oriented, and that she would be much better off if she would turn her mind out of being the mommy into being the agent that's doing the right thing, in the sense of the agency or the adult. So now that we've kind of looked at that and seeing that, okay, where does the dukkha come from? The dukkha comes from the caring about something rather than caring for it. Or we look at it in the sense of mommy's full of criticism about how things should be, but if she would change over to the adult, she could see how things actually are. So, how can we go through this training so that we can stop caring about, so that we can learn to care for the individual? Because the caring about is actually, that's the self, or the one who is being injured when the medical procedure is happening, to where the dog is just being taken care of. So this is where the practice of the Eightfold Noble Path comes into play, of remembering to look at what's going on. This is the sati. Now, modern American English, Western Buddhism, has mistranslated the word sati into mindfulness, and that mindfulness is a mixture of things, that it leaves, or it loses the impact of what sati actually means. And what sati actually means is to remember to be present, remember to be here now, remember to look at what's going on. This is the quality of sati. Now, looking at what's going on, the Buddha says that's the first thing. That comes first. If we can look, if we can see what's going on, this is actually the quality of discernment. As we gain skill of looking and seeing this cause effect over and over again, we begin to draw back a bit and begin to add wisdom to it, in the sense of, now that I see that cause and effect in operation, I can step back and maybe 10 seconds or more and see how things are headed. That's when we are fully engaged in the adult, which means that we're looking at what's not just happening, but what's in process, what's about to happen. And so this takes a training to be able to look and to see, and to look and to see, to remember to look and to remember to look and to see. This is, we're doing it over and over again, but that's not the whole path. That's only just a little bit of the Eightfold Noble Path, and this is actually, in some cases, this is all that you'll find with Vipassana, or maybe the Mahasi method, is that they look and they look and they look. Now, a way of saying that is that they say, well, we have to really know dukkha. Yes, but you don't have to be in dukkha. You just see it as it comes. So we're not becoming experts at digesting dukkha. We're not there to investigate the dukkha. We're only there to investigate what's happening. Is that lending towards dukkha? In other words, if it's heading towards dukkha, we can make the change then. rather than having to experience the dukkha and play with the dukkha and be in the dukkha, etc., like that. And this is, by the way, what brings on these ideas of dry vipassana. It's not juicy at all, it's dry, but it also has this quality of dark night. Well, the dark night comes because one has become super excellent at knowing dukkha. They become so excellent at knowing dukkha that that's all they've got is dukkha. And that's not the teaching of the Buddha. The Buddha teaches to be able to, with discernment, see the dukkha heading in your direction. In other words, the self is arising almost as a target. The bullet goes off, bing, and I see that trajectory and I jump up to become the target. So if someone criticizes you, the criticism is just criticism. It's not criticism of you until you jump up, pop up, and become the target so that it hits you. This is an important point to recognize that we make targets. That's another definition of the word self. Who is the self? It's the target that pops up in order to be hit. And if you don't pop up, the bullet just goes that way. The criticism just goes over there. It doesn't hit you at all. But if you pop up, if you attach to that criticism, then it's you who gets wounded. So there's back to the agent again. The agent can just watch that bullet go right by without popping up to become the target. So how do we practice this? We practice this in the sense of remembering to look and to change. Remembering to look and to change. Now, most people will say, oh, well, I don't have to change because this isn't dukkha. And yet, any thought that you have can, in fact, be improved. And so, as you say, well, this thought right here is good enough, we can say, okay, now let's enjoy that it's good enough. That's the important point, is that we have to bring in joy. We have to lighten the mind. This is where the Buddha talks about it in the sense of gladdening the mind, brightening the mind, changing the mind's attitude about it. In other words, the vet can properly do his job because he's not the owner of the dog. He is there merely to do the job, and he can do that job happily and continue to do the veterinarian's job happily, even though the dog might die. But if the dog dies, the owner is going to feel bad because she owns the dog. But if the vet starts to feel bad because of every dog he loses, this is what they call burnout. Why? Because the vet now cares. He's become part owner of the dog rather than merely being the agent. So how can you make sure that you remain agent without becoming the owner? Well, that's where the I, me, and my comes in, that we can, in fact, deal with stuff. Like Bhikkhu Buddhadasa says, nothing is worth clinging to. Another way of saying it is nothing is worth dealing with as I, me, or I. But we can deal with stuff without owning it, without being mine. So, one of the ways I think that this now points to Michael's question about how do we begin to deal with this. I would say that the first place is, for ordinary people is to start looking at our language, because language is big. It's especially big when we write stuff down. When we're posting on Discord, that's a big thing. If we're talking, that's a smaller thing, but it's still very big as opposed to something that's completely mental. Now, the Buddha would recommend that we fix the mental so that we don't have any trouble with the verbal or with the actual actions of writing it down. But there's a process, and that is, where do we get started? Because most of us are not, let us say, skilled enough to see the minutia that's happening within the mind, but we certainly can see the things that we say, the things that we do. Now, to get started on this, I would like to bring in a game that's played. This is a game that is often played at baby showers. So, Gigi, have you ever been to a baby shower?
Yes.
Have you ever played the game called Baby? And the
I don't think
game,
what
yeah,
that
the
is.
game is that the ladies who were at the baby shower can say anything that they want to, but they can't use the word baby at a baby shower. They have to avoid. They can be careful to use language like infant, or they can speak in, let's say, passive voice. But if somebody uses the word baby, guess what happens at that baby shower party? Everybody breaks up in great big laughter, right? Okay. And just with a little bit of embarrassment, they all begin to watch their language better. Okay. So this I'm bringing in for the group here to start looking at when you use the words I, me, or mine, that we change our language. An example would be I said that, would be that that has been said before, which would be in passive tense, or we could say here, or we can say this place, or we can say now. In other words, we take the self out of it and leave it as mere agency. And so we can begin to avoid the use of the word I, me, or mine. Now, there's another way that we can soften that, and that is by going into plural. We can start using what they call the royal we. Doctors are trained that way. The doctor does not say, I have a diagnosis. It says that we have a diagnosis. So, beginning to change our language, this will help a lot to see how often the self arises when we're trying to communicate with other people. I, me, mine comes out of your vocabulary, and you start using other words. So, in a way, we're like playing the game of avoiding the use of the word baby. We're avoiding the use of the word I, me, or mine. And that sometimes I've actually seen people write post stuff on Discord that's full of I, me's, and mines. And so I'll write down 3 me's, 2 my's, to point out that people take everything personally when it's not necessary to do that. That we can find a language to use that does not reference me, that it references the situation instead. So I advise each one of you to start practicing the use of taking I, me, mine, those 3 words, out of your vocabulary and find other ways to talk. That in fact, Bhikkhu Buddhadasa had a concept that he had uh, dual language, ordinary language, and Dhamma language. He actually called ordinary language balloon language, and Dhamma language was knife language. What do we mean by knife language is that knife language cuts through the situation to where balloons uh, pop. We become attached to the balloon, and then it pops. And then we become disappointed because it was my balloon. But if we begin to use Dhamma language rather than ordinary language, the ordinary language has a lot of I, me, and mine built right into the language. Can you start to use Dhamma language instead, to use the language that has no I, me, or mine in it? This will actually help us to become, let us say, mindful or careful, or remember to look at the language that we're using, and pretty soon we get pretty good at it. So that anytime that we begin to reference a me in there, we can say, aha, I see that. But we have to start at a gross level. So the first place that I would put it is when you're posting or writing, don't reference yourself at all. Don't use phrases like in my humble opinion or the shorthand for that. You could just say, well, some opinions say, without having to own it. Become an agent rather than the owner. If you become the owner, that's where the clinging brings in the self. So, um, Michael, what do you think?
I think that's very good. I really like the part of bringing up the self as a permanent fixed self, and I guess it could be said, I like the way you put it, as leaving it as a moving target, and that helps to not be any fixed self or anything there. And yeah, I really
Yes,
like it. Very good.
right. You're not a moving target. That, in fact, even if they take a direct shot at you, you can move out of the way. It's not me,
Right,
not
right,
mine. There's
right,
got to be a reason why they said that, rather than taking things personally. That
right.
in fact is what the whole quality of that better personality view is that we take things personally.
Yes.
So if we
I
don't take anything personally, there is no suffering. There's no possibility of any suffering if we're taking things like an agent rather than trying to own it, and it becomes me.
the
We
only
don't have.
way that dart hits you is if you take ownership and you allow it to hit you. And
Mhm.
yeah, let's allow that self to come up. That's the only way it can hit you. Is that
Exactly so.
all right? Thank you very much, Dhammarato.
Mm-hmm. So, Gigi, what do you think?
Hello. I'm gonna have to jump off. People are here. But
Well,
it
you
was
have them sit
extremely
down on the
useful.
couch with you.
Sit down on the couch with me. I found this extremely helpful. Thank you. It's really helping me reorient. I was just sharing with them how powerful this is to come back again to the original teachings of the Buddha, where I've learned so many other things that were derivatives of what the Buddha said, but it's so valuable to go back and get back to the roots of it again. And it's helping me clear my mind a lot, and help and also helpful to how I would explain this to somebody else.
Mhm.
So
Yes,
thank you.
it always has to come back to that we are pleasure seeking animals. We are pleasure seeking. And that the dukkha comes in when we do not get our pleasures met. But when you become an agent for your pleasure, then you can, with the mind and with the adult part, with the agent part, guide the pleasure seeking into places that get the pleasure met. That's the important thing is the dukkha comes from not getting what you want. That's the clear teaching of the Buddha, that we are pleasure seeking, that dukkha is not the foundation. We're not there trying to scrub away some original sin. We're there to
Yeah.
have fun without having our fingers get dirty.
Yes. Yeah. And it's just been a journey of that word discernment of what is the actual joy and pleasure versus all the things that we get confused about, you know?
Mhm.
So, an example of that I keep on giving is if someone says something honestly to someone else and that person says, "Oh, that felt bad. That felt harsh. It feels like you're shaming me." And so therefore that's dukkha, that's unwholesome, instead of focusing on what is that noble sangha partner trying to share? How are they trying to help me here? So
Mhm.
there's just a lot of confusion like that in our communities where yeah.
Precisely correct. The Buddha actually depends upon the relationship. He just didn't go out in public and pick on people. He was quite careful but once someone became a bhikkhu, that meant then that they could, in fact, uh, be criticized. And that there were some monks, especially one of the most senior monks, Mahamagala, he was dedicated to the truth and he spoke the truth. Buddha also said that the truth is important. Number one, it's more important that we be truthful than to, let us say, tell someone a lie in the hopes that they can figure out the truth by themselves. That's much more Mahayana. That the Buddha spoke directly, and that the job is for us to be able to speak truth, speak directly, but speak in a way um, that is, let us say, well timed, so that people are not full of self and get wounded. But everybody does that. Everybody is going to cling to their ship going down. And the job of the Buddha, the job of the noble trainer, the job of Mahamagala is to poke holes in that boat. Because if you cannot see, because you're not looking, we need a guide. We need assistance. We need to be able to speak the truth rather than trying to avoid the truth because we don't want to hurt someone's feelings. The reality is that they're hurting their own feelings. We're just telling the truth.
Mm. Thank you,
And so,
Dhammarato. I'll be here next
so
week.
be sure that you're telling the truth, but saying it at well timed. That this is, in fact, the big problem with psychotherapy is that the psychotherapist is actually cautioned to not tell the client the truth, with the idea that if the psychologist tells the client the client is either going to say, "Thank you very much, what a cure," and leave, or they're going to say, "Oh, Mr. Psychologist, you're full of crap. You don't know what you're talking about," and then they leave. And so the psychologists have been trained to not tell the client the truth because in both cases, the client will probably leave. What we need to do is to teach the clients to be able to hear what is being said so that they can then look and see for themselves so that they can change. And
Yes.
this is the real teaching of the Buddha is that we have to be able to see what's going on so that we can change. Now, 99% of the people, they don't want to change at all. And it's not our job to try to change them. But if someone does want to change, that means that they're opening themselves up, not for criticism, but opening themselves up for truth. It's up to them whether or not they take the truth as criticism or not. What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, I think life's a lot. This moment's a lot lighter and a lot easier when there's no I involved in it. When it's just like this.
Mm-hmm.
This is like this, and then there's no body that needs to have a problem with how it is. If we don't make up a story of it's like this and I don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
If
That's
the
the
I's not
captain
there.
going down with the ship. I don't like it. Let me jump on board and drown.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what if you don't like it? If you don't like it, just, well, there it goes. But
Yeah.
it's
Or
not
just
mine.
choose to can literally choose to like it, or you can choose to not care. Either way,
Mm-hmm.
if we're awake and we can see it now, then we can change the thought now.
We can change that narrative so that it doesn't even go so far as to have feelings about I like it or I don't like it.
Mm.
We just say, that's it. There it is. Ta ta ta. I see that. I see you, Myra.
Mm.
So, Edward, what do you think?
There's several topics that have been talked about. A lot of food for thought. Um, I prepared a stupid joke about being a rat with a knife, poking holes in a balloon in the ship or something like that. But this idea of agents, okay, from what Ben was saying. So let's say there does arise a thought of, oh, I really like that, or oh, I hate that, but the agent can say, oh, like, okay, that we can keep that at an arm's distance. The agent takes care of that whole thing, including that there's a part of you that is now caught up in liking or hatred or dismay, but then there's some other part, which has been something that has been coming online for me a little bit, is like I have a family, so I can take care of the whole thing, me included. That me and the other people in the family are things to care for, to nurture, or to be careful with how things are arranged. So like if I'm being careful with how I speak, it's for the other people and me as somebody or a thing that needs training here, that needs attention and care in a sort of agent kind of way. So anyway, there was some analogies that I liked that you provided, and of course I appreciate being able to spend time with people here.
Okay. Welcome, my friend. So, Anna, what do you have to say? Good to see you, friend. Glad you're here.
Beautiful talk. Enlightening as usual. I'm involved myself in object relation study. Pretty similar. Everything kind of the same. Comes to the same place.
Mm-hmm.
But it's nice
Yes.
details about human nature.
Mm-hmm. Don't worry, be happy. The one who worries is the one who cares about it, the me. So the agent can just be happy no matter what happens. The worrier is the me in there. So, Ivan, what do you have to say?
Not much. I joined the last minute. So yeah, just happy to be here listening.
Okay. How about you, Navid?
I feel like this is the last time I'll consciously use I, me, my.
Good. Let's say then that the only issue now is to be mindful of the I, me's, and my's that are unconscious, that they spring up because we're not watching. We're not there for it. And that's where the skill comes in, is to be able to catch those things so that the language becomes, and it's worth practicing. When you're sending an email or writing something down, catch that and change the language so that you write out those I, me's, and mine's. And pretty soon you'll be able to do it with your language when you're speaking. And that, if you can do it when speaking, Then the next is to start watching when it happens mentally. So good luck with that. Don't use those words because they're painful words.
Yeah.
So, Tom, what do you think?
I think problems are lighter when there's no self to pick them up in the first place.
That's right. That's what the word enlightenment means, by the way, is not heavy. We've got the lights on and we can see clearly, and we're not picking stuff up because it's heavy.
Right. It's all good.
It's right. So when that captain goes down with his ship, that's because the ship is big and heavy. And the
He's
rats,
on the wrong ship. You got on the wrong ship.
Right. The ships go down, don't they?
They do.
Yeah, it's time to jump ship. So let's see who else. John, we've got okay. So Mikey, why don't we take this thing and talk about it?
Yeah, this is a splendid call. Thanks for being here today, friends. If you're watching this on YouTube, come join us on the Dhamma Friends Discord. You can find a link to join in the video description. These talks can also be listened to on Spotify, iTunes, and other podcasting platforms. And we invite you to check out OpenSanghaFoundation.org. We've got a whole lot of books by Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, talks by Ajahn Dhammavitu, a Sangha map, and many other resources to play with. So yeah, go have fun. And those of you that are here on the call, feel free to stay. Welcome to stay and make friends with one another, share something on the practice, and keep up the noble friendship. So,
Yeah,
thank
stay long enough to tell Agman what we talked about. Okay, so folks, I'm going to leave now. And I invite you to stay on and make friends with the ones who are here. It's good to have friends, Dhamma friends. So bye-bye now, and thank you all.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Dhammarato.
Dhammarato. Bye-bye.